Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeremy Collins. I'm the Director of Conferences and Symposia here at the National World War II Museum. It's my pleasure to host today's program, which will feature one of my favorite people on campus, our curator, Kimberly Geis, and she will be interviewing our veteran, Alan Moskin, today. Kimberly holds a BA in German and Judaic Studies from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She studied at the University of Freiburg in Germany and holds a master's in library and information science from good old LSU down the road in Baton Rouge. As a curator with the museum since 2008, she facilitated the acquisition of thousands of artifacts and has curated several exhibitions, including Guests of the Third Reich, American POWs in Europe, and she was in charge of the exhibit and presentation that has brought us together today, USC Shoah Foundation's Dimensions in Testimony, Liberator Alan Moskin. Dimensions in Testimony, Liberator Alan Moskin is presented in New Orleans by the Franco Family Fund, Karen and Leopold Scher in memory of the D-Day veteran, Dr. Hal Bumgarden, and Holocaust survivors Rachel and Joseph Scher, and also the Jewish Endowment Foundation of Louisiana through the Sandra and Edward Heller Family Fund. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to pass it off to Kim Geis. Kim, have a great conversation, and I'll join you back for the audience Q&A.
Thank you, Jeremy, for that kind introduction. As a curator here at the museum, it has been my pleasure to be able to help grow the museum's collection. And one of the best parts of my job is to be able to speak with World War II veterans. And that's something that I'm really excited to do today, to be joined by Mr. Alan Moskin. And for several months now, the museum has had the pleasure of virtually hosting Mr. Moskin in our special exhibit gallery, where we're presenting for the first time the USC Shoah Foundation's Dimensions in Testimony Interactive. It's an interactive biography with Mr. Moskin, and it's the first such program to feature an American liberator. And that liberator is here with us today. Alan served with one of the 36 liberating units, the 71st Infantry Division. The Shoah Foundation's Dimensions in Testimony project is designed to allow visitors to engage with virtual representations of a survivor or a veteran. The individuals who participated in this project, like Mr. Moskin, underwent rigorous questioning, interviewing in order to make that interactive experience possible. And we'll give our guest an opportunity to talk a little bit about this experience later in our discussion. But first, we'd like to give Mr. Moskin an opportunity to talk a little bit about his background and pre-war experience. Alan, can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what life was like for you before the war?
Well, hi, Kim. How are you? Good to see you. I say my age, good to see anybody. I was born in Englewood, New Jersey on May 30th, 1926. So if you can read the date that I just said, that means in a few, let me see, today is what, the 20th? 10 days. Big number coming up, 95. I don't even like saying it, my God. Nobody lived to 95 when I was a kid, but knock on wood, today is good. Tomorrow, we don't know yet, but I was born in the Englewood Hospital, as I said, in Englewood, New Jersey, in Bergen County. I lived in the 4th Ward near Teaneck, and it was a very diverse area. I always emphasize this because there were colored, now called Black, and Jewish kids like myself, Catholics, Protestant, somebody from an Asian background, an Indian, Irish, Catholic. It was very diverse. I always emphasize that. We played in the streets. This was obviously before television and before computers, and we just had a radio in the house. But most every mother those days was home. Now, I don't realize now that they work outside the house, but those days Every mother was in the house cooking, cleaning. Dinner time was very important. Our grandparents lived with us. Most of them from the old country came, the Irish, the Italian, the Jew, the Catholics, whatever. We played in the streets. Everybody knew each other. The camaraderie was close then. We played in the streets and the girls hopping around on the sidewalk with hopscotch or whatever. We played ball and I remember the neighbor, the unity. The grandparents sat on the porch and everybody, hi, how. Biggest treat was the Good Human truck that came around every night with the ice cream, 10 cents. When I say 10 cents, some of the kids say, what, 10 cents? That's what it was. And one stick, it was, when you finish eating, would say lucky stick, you got a free one the next day. And everybody, you thought you won the lottery. Everybody was screaming, who won this? But I remember those days, and I remember when Maya Angelou, and then I'll get off this, but Maya Angelou was one of my favorite people, a poet and author, as you know, and said many wonderful things. But she said, I remember, people are more alike than unlike. And I like to say people are more alike than different. I understood that at an early age. I never thought about difference in religion or different pigmentation in the skin. Never entered my mind. You play with kids, you know, with different colored skin or different religion. You don't think about, you know, religion or color of skin. And that stayed with me really my whole life. And I always look back to my upbringing at the Fourth Ward in Englewood. I went through the Englewood school system, graduated 2 weeks. I was 17, very young. I graduated Dwight Morrow High School in Englewood because I had skipped one grade. I don't know, or they thought I had something upstairs, I guess. They skipped me. I didn't like it. I was a good athlete or whatever, but you know, I was younger than the other guys. But so when I hit 17, May 30th, 1943, 2 weeks later, I started at Syracuse University. I went 1 year at Syracuse, and then like every other male at 18 at those days got what's called a draft notice from the government. I was up at Syracuse, report for a physical exam. And if you passed the physical, you went to the Army, the Navy, flyboy, Coast Guard. And I went into the United States Army at the age of 18, down for infantry basic training in Camp Landing, Florida. So now we're up to the point where I got drafted. And you want to ask me anything at that point, I'm here.
You led right into my next question, and you can, you know, you've done this a time or two before. You have been interviewed so many times, and
That's true. That's true.
Appreciate the opportunity to hear the story directly from you. So you were drafted and you went to Camp Blanding, Florida. Had you been that far from home before? Was it your first time away from New Jersey?
I had gone to summer camp for many years, Camp Lennox up in East Lee, Massachusetts. Every summer since I was a kid, you know, freshman, sophomore, for 2 months. I think camp those days, 8 weeks, if I remember, was a couple of hundred. When I say it, people say, how much? I mean, it's so, I think 200, 225 for 8 weeks in a good summer camp, sleepaway. But I went to summer camps where I was away from home to that extent. And then when I played ball, we used to travel a little bit once in a while. But most of the time, most of us were home those days. And I think we had relatives in Miami Beach that I remember when I was a kid that we visited and things like that, but not to Europe or other places that I encountered later on.
So this was a different kind of camp. So
that's
training.
true.
Yeah,
That's true.
So you tell us a little bit about the training. What was that like?
Well, listen, I was a good athlete, I think, and I got along with all the guys. Didn't have any problem with the sleepaway, but learning how to shoot an M1 rifle was not that easy for most of the northern boys like myself. Well, I played ball. I was a good, you know, athlete, but I never had a gun in my hand before, like most of the northerners. And I contrast that with the southern boys who were brought up hunting and fishing, you know, since they were kids. So shooting an M1 rifle, which was my baby in combat, the M1, I love the M1 rifle. I thought it was a really accurate weapon. With it, it was a kick in the chin, as I said, when I first started to learn, but knocked me on my rear end. And some of the guys were laughing at me and all that. But you remember when you first got on I always compare it to two-wheel bicycle when you, my God, how do you stay up? And later on, it's so natural. I always compare that to the M1, right? After a while, it was just, you learn how to squeeze it off and it became very natural. It was my baby, I called it in combat. Never left my right hip. But in basic training, I'll be honest with you, for about 3 months, it was learning how to kill or be killed, how to survive in combat. Stick a bayonet in somebody's belly and shoot weapons, machine gun, BAR, Browning automatic, and marching and everything else. But I was able to get through it without a problem because I said I was a pretty good athlete, and the physical part, excuse me, wasn't that difficult for me. And after 3+ months, and went back home for 3-day furlough, and then went overseas on the Liberty ship convoy over to get into the service in Europe and fight the enemy.
Yeah, I mean, 3 months isn't a very long time when you think about it. And you went, you were a really young man. You went from high school to training, to Syracuse briefly to training, and then already over to Europe. So what were some of your early wartime experiences? What was Europe like at the time when you got over there?
We landed in, well, first of all, going across the Atlantic Ocean, a Liberty ship convoy. Woohoo! Those Liberty ships were not meant to be in the Atlantic Ocean because, well, the guys were seasick, and I don't want to get into the details, but oh my God, get us off these, everybody was throwing up and going, oh, it was terrible. And it took us, I don't know how many days, not like today, to get across. Landed in Liverpool, England. I think we went across the Channel into France. And then I remember we were into what's called a replacement camp, where they send you up, guys, to different outfits as replacements. And this was in early 1945, February, I believe, something like that. I remember all the dates, but and I did that, and then I was set up to join the 71st Infantry Division, as used before, 66th Infantry Regiment, part of the 3rd Army, led by General George S. Patton. And didn't take long before, after some training, if I remember over there, we fought in the Rhineland campaign and then the Central European campaign. And places like, if I remember, Coburg, I remember Beirut, Regensburg, and I think so many different towns. You don't remember them all. Again, the Rhineland campaign, the Central against the Nazis, the Wehrmacht and the Waffen SS and the Hitlerjugend, and many of those battles against the enemy. I lost a lot of close buddies. Too damn many, I'll be honest with you. I always say I was just one of the lucky ones, because if I was 100 meters to the right or the left at any given time, I wouldn't be here. And like most soldiers, I went through some kind of a guilt thing after a while, which I'm not going to get into now, and why I'm here and my buddies are not, and messes you up a little bit upstairs in the brain. GIs will know what I'm talking about, but I was one of the lucky ones. You lost a lot of my close buddies, and I talk about a few of them that were particularly. I remember the 2nd or 3rd day that I was on the front line. Something hit the top of my head, and I reached up, and I'm holding, a blood-soaked arm, and I start screaming names of my buddy, who I knew had a tattoo on his wrist. He was going to soar of an eagle. He was going to soar like an eagle after the war. And now you're holding his arm after you're talking to him 10 minutes before. I mean, you start to realize what combat's. It's not a game or a movie or a television, whatever. It shook me up no end. And a couple of weeks later, I tell everybody, the kids, when I talk to them, that my best friend, the best soldier I knew, had his leg blown off, and I mean, I get it. I don't pull any punches. I tell him what combat really is like. It's not like the movie or a television show, dramatizing, you're making everything look the good guys, the bad guys, and it's like being to hell and back. You're in combat. I can tell you, it's no joy. And seeing my best friend die, and then writing a letter to his mom. It was difficult, and there's foxholes and things. I talk about all that. I don't want to get into all the details
Yeah.
again. I still get a little emotional. I said this hundreds of times, and I still feel their presence. When I speak about it, listen, it's 76 years ago. It's hard. When I say it, it's like happening to me right now, but 76 years, that's most of these kids weren't even born that I speak to, way back then, or their grandparents and know about it. But I'll just repeat that being in combat's like being to hell and back, and leaves a mark on you. I don't care who you are, where you are. It leaves a mark on you. And if you want to know it, it left a mark on me. And I might add that we didn't know what PTSD was in World War II. No, we never heard that term. The only thing they would do was something like this: shell shock. Meant like you were crazy. And they didn't know how to treat it too much. And I'll just add this also. General Patton wasn't much in neurological nervous complaints. It's suck it up. Our officer, the general says, suck it up. You don't want to hear about nightmares. Or he thought maybe that you were a malingerer, or you're trying to get out of combat or something, faking it that you had nightmares. But I had nightmares, and I wasn't faking it. And in retrospect, I probably had what was now known as PTSD, where I used to walk the streets. I remember after the war ended, I was a member of the Army of Occupation, and walked the streets all the time. Couldn't sleep. Guys told me I was screaming next to them names of buddies, whatever. I remember sweating a lot, crying. So I think I probably went through an episode of PTSD, and unfortunately, I fought my way through it, and as time went on, it dissipated. I went about, my life as I got back home after the war ended.
Yeah. I thank you, Alan, for sharing these difficult moments with us. And I think it's important for our audience to hear and to be able to learn from you. And, I do need to ask you about some of the most difficult things that you saw in your service, and some of the things that I'm sure contributed to your memories and your nightmares. And that's what you saw as a liberator at the liberation of Gunskirchen on May 4th, 1945. Now, you had been in Europe and had, as you said, seen some really terrible things and lost friends prior to that time. But can you talk a little bit about those days in early May and where you were and what you saw?
I just want to add one other thing. It's a little bit. I was a scout with somebody else that had an occasion to shoot somebody that was shooting at my buddy. Two guys, they pay up with another fella, go in to make sure the outfit doesn't get ambushed by the enemy. And I forget where it was, but this perpetrator was shooting at my buddy, and I got a couple of rounds off, made a hit, and he fell to the ground. A dead soldier, very young. That was my first realization that we were fighting what we didn't know at the time, but apparently were called the Hitler Jugend, or the Hitler Youth. Very young. I was only 18, but they looked like 16, 17. How can you be so young, my buddy? But this dead guy that I shot, who was shooting at my buddy, had a helmet next to him, and next to the helmet was a picture of an elderly man and woman, and it said, "Wir lieben dich, Mutti und Vati." I know enough German that was "We love you, Mom and Dad." And even though my rational part of my brain, I knew that was the enemy. He was shooting at my buddy. If he saw me behind this Panzer tank, he would have tried to blow me away. I did my job. I followed. I understood all that. When I saw that picture of this man and woman said, "Wir lieben dich, Mutti and Patti," and I killed their son, it's hard to put into words, but that was very upsetting to me. I had nightmares about that I killed this young boy, forget that he was a Hitler Youth threat, and that their parents were never going to see him again. And I kept looking at that picture in my mind, and don't ask me why, but that was one of my nightmares over and over. I killed my share of the enemy, okay? I was a good soldier, I did my job, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I never enjoyed killing. It left a mark on me. To kill anybody is something, everybody reacts differently, but it wasn't a cup of tea for me. It left a mark on me. So I'll leave it at that. Now, let me get back to what your question was about. Before we got to this was early May of 1945, near the end of the war. I remember we came across a POW camp, a prisoner of war camp, mostly RAF, Royal Air Force, British flyboys. Very thin, but overall in decent shape, except for obviously not eating regularly or whatever. Very thin, but very happy to be liberated. There was a lot of hugging, obviously, and camaraderie and talking about this. And for the first time, we heard then, and one of them said to us, "Hey guys, we're not sure, but we heard a rumor that there's a camp for Jews a few kilometers down the road." And then we said, "What? Okay, we didn't know anything about it." When I say we, my lieutenant, my captain, none of us, we knew that Hitler wasn't fond of Jews. I mean, the communications, not like today, you didn't have television or all that. So we knew that the Jews weren't, that Hitler wasn't crazy about Jews in Germany, but we knew nothing about a camp or concentration camp. We said, "What? Okay, we thought it was a rumor." We were ordered to go to it. I think Linz, I'm not sure, there's still some residual fighting going on. And I remember it was a damp kind of a day, kind of wet the ground. And the first thing, and I've always said, the first thing that hit you was a terrible stench, a smell that got into your nostrils, into your brain. We all said, "What is that freaking smell?" You could hardly breathe. And then I remember through the trees, it was like a forest area. There was this big villa or compound with a barbed wire as far as you could see it. Up on the top said Arbeit macht frei. Well, again, I knew a little enough German that would work will make you free. What a bunch of garbage that turned out to be, but that's what they had up there. I guess they wanted people to think that it was just in there to do work. Very little resistance. There was one SS guard. Most of the others had retreated. It was near the end of the war. I had to take care of him, and that was the last mistake he made because he wouldn't drop his gun for some reason. We then cut through while we entered that camp was the Gunskirchenlager, a sub-camp of Mauthausen. Later on, realized that Mauthausen, the big camps like Mauthausen and Bergen-Belsen and some of, when they got filled up, they sent these people on what was called a death march. We didn't know it at the time. I'm just telling you a little bit that I learned later. And the death march, they go to a sub-camp. And one of the sub-camps of Mauthausen was the Gunskirchenlager. Another one, I think, was Ebensee, and I think Gusen. That's my recollection, but this was later on. But when we entered this camp, Gunskirchen, I've said it so many times and I say it over and over again. It was the most horrific sight I've ever seen. And I saw a lot of dead bodies in combat, whatever. It wasn't that I didn't see death or dead bodies, but there was a pile of skeleton-like bodies on the left and another pile of skeleton-like bodies off to the right. When I say skeleton-like, I mean like just bones with no flesh. I always say those poor souls, because that's what my lieutenant kept screaming out when we entered, looking, those poor souls. He said, "Look at those poor souls that were alive were so emaciated. It defies description. If they weigh 70, 80 pounds, that they looked to me like, their arms looked like, I always said, like broomsticks with no flesh in their cheeks hollowed out and their eyes sunken back into the sockets of their heads. And sores all over their bodies. The stench I told you about. They had these, It looked like pajamas to me. I'm not sure. It was like gray and white tops and bottoms. Some I couldn't distinguish genitalia because they all looked like bones and you couldn't tell. And I remember we kept looking at each other. What is going on? These were civilians. So we weren't prepared for stuff. My captain was screaming to the rear with a walkie-talkie. I think you couldn't, that's the communications we had then. He couldn't get through. He was screaming, "Get help up here, damn it, there's bodies all over here. There's people dying is up." And he couldn't get through, so he was frustrated. We weren't prepared for something like this. And then I remember hearing Essen bitte, Wasser bitte, cigarette, food, water, cigarette. I didn't smoke. I remember my buddies that smoked, started handing out these cigarettes and had the lighter ready to light it. Some of these poor souls would grab these cigarettes. They didn't want to smoke. They ripped the covering off the cigarette and start eating and chewing the tobacco. You have to see this, what starvation does. And then when they said Essen bitte, Wasser bitte, cigarette, I knew enough Essen food. So we had what do we have, Spam or crap, whatever we had, army issues then. I think today they have MREs ready to eat. It's a little better, but whatever we had, we started handing out, and you had to visually see how they would grab some of the stuff and start biting and chewing so fast. And the next thing, many of them, if you can see, would grab their esophagus, their throat, and start choking. Now here you're trying to help, and people now choke. I want you. We were confused. Apparently, I'm not a doctor, but when you're starved, apparently your esophagus closes up for a lot of people. They couldn't swallow, so they're choking. And remember, the medics start screaming, "No solid food, damn it, no solid food," because that's what was happening. But I'm just trying to tell you, it was chaos. And then, the barracks, the lieutenant, go check the huts or barracks as far as you could see, upper and lower, went in there. There were dead bodies in there. The stench was so overpowering, you couldn't breathe in there. And I remember they were all looking toward us, those who were sitting on dead bodies that were alive. They were praying again in all kinds of dialects. And then they do Hilfen Sie mir. I said, I knew something like, "Help me. Can you help me?" I couldn't stay in there because I was almost going to pass out from the smell of the stench and I came out of there screaming to the medics, get help up here. There's bodies in here. There's people dying in here. And I get emotional even when I talk about it now because I bring back the picture. I've said this thousands of times. But then on the side as I came out, something I can never ever forget. There was a dead horse. And there were 3 of these inmates with the bark of a tree that they cut, and they were digging it into the guts of a dead horse. And I'm watching, and they pull out the entrails of a dead horse and start to bite and chew, and the blood is squirt. If you don't think that upsets you, I mean, that's what starvation does to people. You have to see it to believe it. Cannibalism was very close, with a lot of people there. It's hard to imagine you could do things like that. And one thing that I want to get across that I don't want to leave out, there was one elderly man when I said that ich bin a Jude, broken German's best I could, Amerikaner oder Jude, he knew a little English. And when I said that I was an American Jewish soldier and that he was free, well, best I could, we'll take you, the hospital, take care of you. He was helping a little bit with the English. But when I said that I was an American Jewish, because at first they were frightened, they didn't know who we were. I mean, they just see people, they're half delirious. But first time he smiled and he came toward me and I thought he was going to embrace me, but he went down on his hands and knees. I'm looking, and he starts kissing my boots, and my boots were caked with feces and blood and mud and vomit. I knew he was trying to be affectionate toward me, but I never had anybody grovel at my feet, so to speak. I didn't like it. It made me very uncomfortable. And I picked him up under the armpits and brought him up, and God help me, the smell. I know I said this before, but the stench was so powerful. But he had his arms around me and he kept saying, "Danke, American, Jude, Jew, and then as he came up, the back of the nape of his neck all the way down, there were these open, and this is graphic, but I want everyone to get the picture, the open, pussy, festering sores. And out of those sores, lice was crawling. I mean, they all had lice because of the filth of the camp. And God help me, I wanted to pull away, but I didn't. He was holding me, thanking me, and I felt his tears. He was crying on my cheek, and I don't cry that easy, but I started to lose it a little bit. It's a scene that I can never, ever forget how happy he was to be liberated, so to speak, or to be free. So all I can tell you is this, that everywhere you looked in the Gunskirchen lager, everywhere was the foul stench of the dead and the dying. And I said this hundreds of times, it's a scene I can never, ever forget. And I never want to hopefully ever see a scene like that again. And I don't want anybody else to forget it either. That's why I've been talking to thousands of young students, middle school, high school, colleges all over the country. And I'm going to continue to do it as long as God gives me the strength, because I want them to know that there was a Holocaust, and I bear witness. I do the best I can. It's not easy to talk about these things, but I want them to know the truth. The deniers are out there right now, Kim, and I don't want to be negative, but I know in 5 or 10 years, when there's some liberators like myself and the survivors and the kinder transport and the hidden children and the righteous Gentiles, who, by the way, never get enough credit. I got a lot of friends whose grandparents they were called righteous to help their Jewish friends and neighbors, knowing that if they got caught, their whole family was thrown in the concert. That took a lot. We say the Jews, chutzpah, guts, courage, and I always want them to know that I respect that so in. But listen, I do the best I can. I describe it. It left a mark on my heart, my soul. I can't get rid. It's like a tattoo here, but I can't get rid of it. I don't think about it every minute of the day, but when I get into it, I want these kids to know exactly what I felt, what I saw, and bear in mind that I was the age of most of those seniors in high school. I was only 18. I didn't turn 19 till the war had ended in Europe. And when I think back now, I look at 18-year-olds, I said, oh my God, I was that young. Yeah, I guess when you get a few bullets that go over your head, you kind of age pretty fast. But I try to describe it as best I can. It's not a pleasant talk, but I want people to know the truth, that there was a Holocaust, and I want them to make sure that something that we went through, that we saw, never happens again. That's why I'm talking, and that's why God gives me the strength. I'm going to continue, hopefully when this pandemic is over, to get back to the schools, because I like to see the kids and, and get a hug from them and talk to them and see their expressions and the questions they ask, and the teachers say that when I talk to them, it's so much more than when they just read it in a book or whatever. So God willing, 95 and counting, I hope I'll still be doing this.
I know that we talked a little bit that you mentioned that you've talked to about 35,000 students probably, and I'm sure many more, are watching.
I don't know where you got that figure. It's 130.
I heard that number 35,000, but
no, it's much more than that. It's 130.
Okay.
Okay.
350,000 maybe, who knows? It's more for the future.
It's 1995. That's when it started.
I was going to ask you that. So it took you a long time, before
Correct.
You were able to or willing to talk about what you saw and your experiences. I know that was part of your journey and how you have been making up for lost time. But when did you start talking about it, and why did it take you so long?
Well, first of all, I thought that if I the nerve-wracking episodes that I had when the war ended, my nightmares and scant sleep went on for about 6 months or a year. When I got back home, I went back to Syracuse studying pre-law, then went to NYU Law School. And when you start getting into studying everything, gradually my mind was more concentrated on that, thankfully. And the nightmares slightly, not went away, but slightly were dissipated. And I felt that if I was going to talk about what I just talked about now, that was going to bring back the nightmares again. So it was like I took a key and I locked up that part of my brain, threw the key away and wasn't going to speak. And I figured that anybody that asked me, what did you do in World War II? I said, I did my job. I fought on the patent and I changed the subject. So they got the drift. I thought I was going to bring the nightmares back if I start to talk. And finally, when I moved up to Rockland County many years ago in 1995, which is 50 years after the end of the war in Europe, a lady at the local Holocaust Museum in Spring Valley at the time in Rockland County by the name of Barbara Grau, who since passed away. She heard the story about me from some other GI. Did you know Moskin was with Patton Third Army? He was a liberal. No. And so she got my telephone number. She called me on the phone. Was that true, Mr. Moskin? Oh boy, now I got somebody to speak to the school. Well, I was very shook up and I said, no, you don't. And I hung up the phone. I was rude. I didn't mean to be. It was just this, she kept calling me and she was very aggressive. Please, I will finally agree that I would try it one time. It was too much for me. She wouldn't ask for me to speak again. So 50 years after the end of the war in Europe, in 1995, I spoke for the first time at the old Danuet Mall here in Rockland. And I was dead wrong. It was like a catharsis. It was like a purging of all that poison that I was bottling up inside of me. It just came out. I must have spoke for an hour and a half, 2 hours. I couldn't believe how it was like a relief. And somebody told me sometimes it's like when you go to a psychiatrist, they can talk and that was good for me to get it out. And as you know, now after 50 years and start to speak, maybe they can't stop me. I'm getting calls all over the country. And
we're still hounding you to tell your
story. They can't
story.
find too many liberators anymore. I'm elected with the technology. My God gets on the phone, Mr. Maria. The next thing, calling me from Wyoming, from Arkansas. I said, what? But I'll do the best I can, and God willing, as I said, I'm going to get this talk out as long as I can, particularly to the middle school, high schools, and the colleges. I speak to adult groups too, but I mainly want to hit the young people and let them know what happened back then and make sure that they understand it and they make sure what I saw back then never happens again.
Well, I think your participation in the Dimensions and Testimony project, in which you answered many, many questions, is important. You certainly have contributed to the historical record, and that project and all of these interviews that you're doing will live on. What is it like, what was it like, being part of the Dimensions and Testimony project, answering so many questions?
Oh boy, that's enough. This group from the Shoah Foundation came down to where I live from California. It's Spielberg's Shoah Foundation. I didn't know much about it. And they said they're going to do this Dimensions and Testimony. And there were people that I've become friendly with since, Bonnie and others couldn't have been nicer to me. And they had me go to New Jersey for 1 week, for hours every day. Yeah, got me dressed up in a nice little outfit, sitting in a chair, and they asked every possible question that they thought would be connected to what you're talking about now, the Holocaust and what I went through, etc. And what did I see? What did I feel? Hundreds of questions on Monday, Tuesday, 5 days. And I think they did the same thing with some of the Holocaust survivors. But as far as I'm concerned, they covered almost any possible question. And then they explained to me this dimension. I didn't know, I'm not good with the technology. The dimensions and tests. I said, what is this all about? Alan, they said, in 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, the kids are going to be in the classroom. And what we're doing here, they're going to show them asking a question. And we feel we've covered every possible question. And then you have answered. And they're going to see you literally sitting in the chair and being in the room and talking and answering the question. I said, you're scaring me. This is weird. You know, I'm not, but I guess it's a good thing. It's different again than, you know, years from now when we're all gone, that they're going to be able to almost see like it's live again. So I understand. Are you working with them to a certain extent with the?
We are, yes. So we actually are the first institution to be able to host your program, your exhibition, your interactive live. So
Wow.
visitors here to the museum until September 11th of this year can
Yeah.
ask a question of and interact with your system that the Shoah Foundation created out of those thousands of questions that you answered over that period of time. So how do you
Amazing.
like that?
Oh, it's scary in a way, you know. I wish I could be a fly on the wall and come back years on and see
Well, I
myself.
did invite you. I hope you can come and see yourself.
I heard the place down you told in New Orleans, what you and Jeremy told me. I
Yeah,
was there many years ago in the beginning, and Tom Hanks and Mr. Spielberg and I think Gary Sinise to a certain, they all got involved, and they're still doing a wonderful job. And I respect what they're doing on behalf of the veterans. But if Krista and I can
Well,
find the time, I'd love to go down, because Jeremy told me, my God, you got a whole covered blocks now. You got a hotel.
well,
There's
we hope
amazing
to have
place.
you. We will give you the red carpet, but I have a few more questions.
One, let me answer what I said to some of the people from California. Suppose the kid asked a question that you just somehow didn't cover. Well, what's going? So they had me cover for that. Well, I don't understand that question. I can't quite answer. So I was kind of kicked out of that, because I said, are you sure you covered every possible question? So they covered that too. So in case it's something that they didn't answer, that's how I get out of that. But I'm glad that you guys are working with the
Yeah.
Shoah Foundation.
Yes,
They're doing a great job, and Stephen Smith and Bonnie and the others out there, they still stay in touch with me.
great. Yeah, I
Ju-
think, part of that
June
project.
Biela, I gotta get a name in. June Biela, she don't always say how you doing, and touch with what. And one other thing, I'm a vice president of the Holocaust Museum and Center for Tolerance and Education and Suffering, and we're doing a job in our county and elsewhere about trying to also educate the young people. And I want to send kudos out to Paul Galland and Andrea Winograd, my other fellow exec. I want them to know that they're doing a great job. We all are trying to get the word out like you are, but that what happened back in World War II, that there was a Holocaust, and we got to make sure that it never happens again. So we're very active in Rockland County to get that word out, as well as Westchester County also. People like Billy Jasper and Julie Scalero. I'm giving them all a plug, because they do a wonderful job at educating the young people about what happened back in World War II and the Holocaust.
I mean, thank you. And you are such a busy man, and we appreciate you and your efforts and the efforts of all of those who are helping us to document and share the stories of the Holocaust and the other lessons from World War II. Do you have a particular message for the young people out there? What do you want your legacy to be as a veteran, Alan?
A legacy. I never thought in terms of having a legacy, but I might add that a few years back, I got very emotional, and I was getting into it, and I talked about hate. I don't like the word hate. I said I saw hate with the Hitler Youth. I saw hate with the Waffen SS, not with the German Wehrmacht, but with the Nazis. The hate that they had. We never had the hate. We wanted to win the war and go home. But that hate was something I couldn't understand. I said, hate begets hate. I don't want to hear about seeing hate anymore, sorry. And I started getting emotional. I was speaking at some school in Westchester. And all of a sudden I said, can't we hug each other instead of hate? I'm a hugger. I like to hug people. And a little black girl got up, and turned out that she was a part of a singing group. I didn't know what, and she starts singing and singing. The man says, "Hug, don't hate, you gotta hug," and do the lyrics and everything like that. And everybody came up to me later, gave me a hug, hundreds of kids. And I start using that at the end. And now I'm known as the liberator who says, hug, don't hate. And I get letters from a lot of the schools saying, Mr. Moskin, we formed the Hug, Don't Hate Club, Your Honor. And I told him, they want to put that on my tombstone. He said, hug, don't hate. I'll settle for that because hugging is good. And
Yeah.
hate begets hate. I say it over and over. I don't want to see hate. You don't hate. I tell my grandchildren, you don't hate your vegetables. You know, I don't like my see, what do the vegetables do to you? What do you? So you'll try to make it light, but get rid of the word hate. It's a vicious. I saw it so close with the Nazis and the and I never understood where that hate comes from. And we saw a little bit of that, unfortunately, in January 6th. And that broke my heart to see. I thought I'd never see anything like that in this
Yeah.
country, but hate is still out there in this country too, with Kim. We got plenty of hate groups, the Ku Klux Klan, the White National, the Proud Boys. I'm calling it like it is. I want to get rid of that group. I want to get rid of the hate. Let's be lovers and hug each other. That's a lot better than having that hate, because hate consumes hate.
I'm with you. I want to form a Hug Don't Hate club here now. So I'll let you know how that goes. Well, I think we want to, take a little bit of time and ask some questions that that we might have from the audience. And I have one that I see here that asks about relates to your experience as an American Jew fighting in Europe. So did you feel, sort of an extra danger or risk? You mentioned talking about how you knew that Hitler wasn't crazy about the Jews, but you didn't know about the camps. Did you feel that extra risk as an American Jew in Europe?
Well, let me put it this way. When we got over there, our lieutenant said to myself, and I think there was two other Jewish kids in the platoon. We don't know what the enemy's going to do. We had dog tags that said H on it, which stood for Hebrew. C for Catholic, P for Protestant. That was on your dog tags where you wore around your neck. And he said, if you Moskin, and you forget the other guys, we don't know what the Nazis are going to do if they catch you as a prisoner. So if you want to take your dog tags off and give them to me, I'll hide them or. Well, I said, hell with that. I'm not taking it off. I'm proud of it. I'm going to leave it on. That was a tough little kid, I guess, whatever. But, we didn't know what the Nazis were going to do. And I heard stories later that some of the prisoners of war that were Jewish weren't treated very nicely. That's hearsay. I don't know. I didn't see it. But I was told that later on. But no, to be honest with you, I was over there fighting as an American. I mean, I get some questions like this because you saw that these were Jewish people in the concentration camp. Did that upset you more because of being a Jew than you was your brethren? So, and I'll be honest with you, I never thought of it that way. To me, these were human beings. I never thought about that the fact that they were, Jewish or Catholic, that they were human beings treated so badly. That was as an 18-year-old American soldier, Jewish, I never thought in terms of being Jewish. Later on, maybe I started to react more about what was going on. But at that time, they were just poor souls, poor human beings. And we wanted to do the best we could and try to help them. But I never really got into it too much, that being a Jew and what's going to happen to me. I felt more like an American. I still do, but, and I have to be honest. Some of the Orthodox Jewish people, I don't know if they're crazy about that answer, but I have to be honest. I just said, my God, these poor souls, I never thought that, oh my God, they're Jewish until later on, thinking about it. But that's my reaction. These were human beings that were treated like animals, and I didn't care what the religion was or anything else. I just wanted to help and do the best we could. That's my best answer.
Some of the other questions are, how many scouts were with you when you found the camp? Were you with your whole company, or were there a lot of you?
the whole lot, my whole company, it was my whole company. Wasn't just, what sometimes Alan Moskin was a liberal. Listen, I didn't do it myself, for God's sake. I mean, I'm just reciting what happened. I don't want all this credit like that. It could be a Audie Murphy, a hero or something. I mean, we all did our job. This was our whole outfit, a company that they got in there. I found out later, I didn't know at the time, my idea that there was a black unit, I think a tank outfit, that also, Goods Cushion was a very big camp. And they must have been on the other end and the other side, because some of the people that were liberated told me there was a black soldier that had liberated them. And by the way, I'm in touch now with some, took many years, of people that survived Goods Cushion. Dr. Edith Eger out in California, who is now a psychologist or whatever, an amazing story, what she's doing to help people with PTSD, believe it or not, as a doctor who was in that camp. And everybody I saw, I said, anybody that survived the hell and horror of that camp. I got a good friend from Philadelphia, Mike Herskovitz, and his Tanya and his wife. I mean, anybody that survived, I said, how? It's a miracle now that they lived a full life and they have children and grandchildren. And one lady whose father was in Goods Cushion took, when she saw me over in one of the group called the March of the Living, she heard that I liberated Goods Cushion. She's, oh my God, Alan, my father was in Goods. You got to come to Toronto. So I went to Toronto, met her father and a few others. And I said, my God. And she said something to me. I'll just say this. I never thought of it. This, Alan, you liberated my father, and I'm here. My brother is here. My children are here, and they're going to have children. So there's an expression, when you liberate one, you liberate the world, or something like that. She got me kind of emotional about the fact it wasn't just her father. It was everybody that went down the line after that I liberated. And I never thought of it that way, but it's a little scary to think, my God, it's wonderful in a way, but it's amazing with the people that I come across that survived that camp. They deserve so much credit, because that was a living hell to be in that camp. They, God willing, it's how they survived and made a life for themselves. They should, kudos to every one of them.
Well, how about that for a legacy? I mean, that's a wonderful legacy as a liberator, to be able to see those lives that were made possible. One of our visitors have asked about if you have ever returned to Europe or ever returned to Austria and visited those areas that you fought in, that you liberated.
Yeah, I went back once with a group called the March of the Living, and we saw a certain place. But it's like, listen, you can't recreate what we saw, the smell, the dead bodies, the emaciated, but they do the best they can. I know people say, oh, I went back to Auschwitz, Birkenau with the railroad track. Some of the things they show, but how can you ever recreate the stench and the dead bodies that we saw? It's almost impossible. So for me, I went back once with a young group called a Group of the Living many years ago, I think in 2005. Got in touch with a lot of good friends that I know now in Rockland County that went on that trip, like Paul Adler and Dave Kirstell and others, and Carol Berkman. And, I remember the camaraderie that we had, me speaking about what I remember, but you couldn't recreate what we felt and what we saw back then. It's just impossible. It's something that, you almost had to be there to understand the depth of it. I mean, I know they show movies and television, but I don't think they can really, bring it back as what I remember when I was there as a young 18-year-old soldier.
Nor
One thing
would
I
we
want to
want
add,
to, right?
I want to just throw this in. The patriotism was sky high in World War II. I wish I could bring back that patriotism today. I mean, after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7/40, guys were running to the draft board, 16-year-olds lying about their age to fight for the country. I want these young people to know, look, I hope the call never happens. I know mothers don't want their kids to fight. That's normal. My mother didn't want me to go. No mother wants their son to fight. But if the call comes, I want these young people to know, do what we did. get out there and fight for the country. They're living in the greatest country in the world. We're not perfect. We can do better, but we're still the best thing going around. And I tell these young people, not everybody's got a beautiful house and a clean bathroom and a nice bed to sleep. But when I speak to them, when young people go into outhouses, don't know where their next meal is coming from. Sometimes they have to be shook up and know how great they have it, not take it for granted. They thank their mom and dad every day and their teachers who go out of the line to do what they do. It's very tough to be a teacher today with the restrictions and all that. So I give it to them and I tell them, get out there and do the right thing. And because they call us the greatest generation, my generation, maybe we were. But one thing we didn't do, we didn't get rid of the hate. And it's still out there with the Ku Klux Klan and the Proud Boys and the other wackos. And I want these young kids to know that and to try to change things for the better because they're living in the greatest country in the world. And I want them to appreciate that.
Alan and Kim, thank you for this great conversation. I'm going to step in and finish up the Q&A here. This is a pretty specific question, but it seems to be a mother and a son or a daughter and a grandson of a veteran, of a serviceman who was part of the 71st, but was killed in action on April 1st, 1945, which happened to be Easter Sunday. Corporal Robert Reno. It's a specific question, Alan. If you don't recall this or weren't a part of the action, that's fine. But there was a river crossing at Oppenheim in late March of 1945. Do you remember your experiences of that Easter 1945 period?
Yes, I do. I didn't know where it was. You got to remember, half the time you're just following orders. You're not sure where you just do what your lieutenant tells you or your sergeant. But I do remember vaguely that crossing. People will ask me, "Do I know this fellow or know that?" No, I don't remember that name. But God willing, hope they remember him. And as I said, I lost a lot of buddies in all these outfits, and it's always the feeling, never by the grace of God go I. As I said many times, I'm not that religious in the real, but I think maybe there is a higher power up there because if I was 100 meters to the left or 100 meters to the right, I wouldn't be here. And I often wonder who put me here. How come I wasn't there? And you get a little whacked up in your mind. It's hard to put into words, but unfortunately, some guys got it, and I feel bad about every one of them. But I was just one of the lucky ones that I'm here talking to you.
Well, to Roberta, who is the daughter of Corporal Reno, and Matthew, who is the grandson,
My blessings.
you for your sacrifice as a war orphan. That's a whole nother topic that we hope to be able to delve into here at the museum. It's an important legacy. Alan, we have a question about the Coburg. This is another specific to your service, the Rhineland and Eastern European campaign. Can you expand on liberating the forced laborers and DPs, such as Dutch civilians? Did you encounter any others?
So my specific outfit didn't participate in that. You got to remember there were different companies, different platoons, different regiments, so we all, were in different areas. So I can only remember that the POW campus I talked about and Gunskirchen, but there were other outfits that I found out later. We didn't know how many camps there were at the time. We thought Gunskirchen. Then we found out later. My God, guys start talking about Bergen-Belsen and Buchenwald, and I think there was a couple of other Gusen and Ebensee, which were some camps of Mauthausen. As I said, they went on death marches to go to these sub camps. And the last thing I heard, Jeremy, was that from the museum and that they got close to 40,000 of these. If you count all the sub camps, there were 40,000 of these hellholes all over Europe. And what a number that is. It's staggering. But we didn't, every outfit came across one or the other. I didn't even know that there were black soldiers liberating, the other side. So of Gunskirchen, I found out later. And it's hard to tell you that, it was just overwhelming that we didn't realize one-on-one until we found out later how many camps there were.
We are up against our hour. I'd like to close with a few general comments from the audience, not so much questions. Margaret says, "Thank you, Mr. Moskin, for telling your story. May God bless you with many more years to speak out. My father never talked about his experience in World War II, and your explanation has helped me understand why. I appreciate your candidness and commitment." And Bryn Potter says, "Thank you for your service and willingness to share your story. This is your important legacy." And as Kim mentioned, your legacy will live on for generations, sir, not just through this recorded webinar, but also through the wonderful Dimensions in Testimony interactive biography that USC Shoah Foundation has put together with you over those long days and hundreds or thousands of questions. I encourage everyone that can make it down here. We are open. We've been open since Memorial Day of last year, following all the right restrictions and precautions. But it is truly a remarkable experience, and I'd like to go into the gallery just to watch how the visitors interact and converse with you here, Alan, especially the children. The children seem to be a little shy at first, but then after the first time or two, then they really do feel like they're having a conversation. And I'm excited that my grandchildren someday will be able to do that. Kim, I sold you short a little bit. Kim is not just one of our curators. She is the Assistant Director for Curatorial Services here as well at the museum. And we are delighted to have you host this wonderful conversation. Alan, that invitation stands, whether it's while the biography is running through September or anytime after that. We'd love to get you here and probably put you on stage again to talk to a live audience. And I invite everyone to come on down. Please stay tuned and check our events calendar on the website for all of our upcoming virtual programs. And let's virtually give a round of applause to Kim Geis and, of course, Alan Moskin. Thank you very much for being a part of this, and may you all have a great day and a great weekend.
Thanks, Jeremy and Kim. Thank you. And hopefully maybe I'll get down there and see you guys in person, okay? But thanks for everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Be well and take care.